nature of the relationship among these people that creates this particular social world that they're living in which this becomes the reality that they see. It's a much more interesting question to me because it demands that I no longer think just about myself. It demands that I think about my relationships with other people. And so it wouldn't surprise anybody. I don't think anybody would challenge the idea, different group of people, different ending to the conversation, right? Because everyone's going to bring something different into it. I found this website that is the functional equivalent of the telephone game, but it's on the internet. And it uses this post-it notion. And this is so awesome. There's very few that I could bring to share with you today. You'll understand why, because there's no moderator of this. You just do whatever you want. But it always starts with somebody writing something on a post-it note. The first person writes something on a post-it note. The next person that comes along, all they see is the first post-it note, and their job is to submit a drawing of what's been written. The next person, all they see is what's been drawn, and they have to title this, and it just continues. And so it goes from naming to drawing to naming to drawing. Okay. Well, that's one. So this starts out, right, you got to remember this. This one I picked, this is another really good one because it's a great example of communicative rules. This one is a statement where somebody has defined the object and then given us a rule to follow to influence the process. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but this is somebody who's aware of what might happen to the message. And so the object is a stone on the ground, and here's the rule: nothing else. Okay? This is a parent. I'm thinking this is sort of the parent mode we get into. A stone on the ground, nothing else. All right? So here you go. So the person has a stone on the ground. So the next person that logs on, they get to see this, and they have to label it. So they see it, and they say a lone rock lies on a brown expanse. Not bad. It's pretty close. Okay. So the next person logs on, they get to see a lone rock on a brown expanse. There we go. A lone rock lies on a brown expanse. There you go. We're doing great. Remember what we started with, right? Rock on the ground, nothing else. A rock lies on the ground. We're doing great. Now, we're running a little trouble. A rock lies on the ground, and so somebody gets on. Now, they're way removed from the rule, okay? So now this is somebody who hasn't heard about nothing else, right? And so there's the rock on the ground, but I'm going to throw a little, a tree and some balloons or trick cereal. I can't decide which that is. But I love this. We call this metacommunication in our field. Let me label this for you. It's really a violation of the rules because it's supposed to be a drawing. But this person's feeling a lot of pressure and doesn't want the whole thing to fall apart because of them. So they're giving some instruction. Which I think is interesting because it demonstrates this is somebody who understands that somebody's attention might be drawn to this or to this. So at least they're, Hold on. There we go. The Rock, all right? Dwayne Johnson, the actor who is The Rock, lays down with flowers under a tree. Okay. Now we got some trouble, okay? Now we are. We're getting a little out of hand with this, and so now it's just going to go nuts. Dwayne Johnson lays down with flowers under the tree. So, Dwayne, if you know The Rock, he's one of these, and so there's this sort of, I guess, supposed to be a muscular guy with the drooping flower, which I think is interesting. Now, one of the things I always tell my students is that one of the things this demonstrates is that the rules are important, okay? But life is much more interesting when we don't follow them, because you get this kind of stuff. So to written band, you guys can imagine how this would get out of hand with some of these things. Okay, so there's the picture of that, and somebody sees that, and a yellow guy on the beach, or on the beach, and remember where we began, a stone on the ground, nothing else. All right, so there's a great demonstration of sort of this commodity view of what happens as we pass from person to person. The perspective that I'm proposing today is less about the creation of meaning, which is what the commodity view would share with us. The perspective that I'm sharing today is less about what do I do with this commodity that helps you get it the way I get it. It's much more involved, or much more interested in the notion of management. And the management of the meanings that get generated between us. Okay? That in my interactions with others, because of who I am and because of who you are, but more importantly because of the relationship that we have, and I'll share some examples of this today, because of the relationships that we have, the meanings that are going to emerge, really, I would argue, whether we do anything about it or not. And so the notion here becomes, how mindful are we about this particular relationship that we're in this moment? How mindful are we about managing this so that meanings emerge that help us get something done, to help us understand a concept, that help us create a social world that we would like to live in. With the students that I teach, that's really what our emphasis is on. Is how do we do this in terms of promoting social change instead of imposing it? How do you manage the emergence of a social change? And so we are always asking ourselves, with this particular perspective, we are always asking ourselves the question, which gets back to why we call this social construction. We are always asking ourselves the question, what are we making here? In this moment, what are we making here? And it does that question does two things for us. One, it illustrates the notion that it's about us. What are we making here? Not what am I making here? And again, I'll go back to my parenting experience. When you're raising a child, you learn very early on that it's not about you. Okay? It just doesn't. You may want it to be, but it isn't going to work out that way. It's about us. Always. It's about us. And so one of the things I love about that question is, what are we making here? Is that it emphasizes us instead of just me. And the second thing that it suggests is that we can make something different. And that becomes a critical key for us. That at any moment we want, at any moment we may choose, if we are mindful enough in the moment, we can make something different. All of us, I'm sure, have had the experience of where you were in a conversation with somebody, maybe an argument, maybe it wasn't going so well, and you thought of something to say, and you thought to yourself, you know, if I, in the nanoseconds that you have, that if I say this, nothing good is going to come from it. If I say this, somebody's feelings are going to get hurt. If I say this, it's going to derail the conversation. Well, I'm going to say it anyway. And out it comes. And it might be that it gets out, and then you go, wait. But it's gone, you can't get it back. We've had that moment. We've been mindful enough that we know, well, I probably shouldn't say this one, but we've been mindful enough where we know, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be the bigger person, I'm going to be the better individual, and we make something better out of something that was heading down the path of not being so good. We can think of those moments where we intervened in the process and made something different. We're also capable of, after the fact, thinking through the interaction and thinking to ourselves, what could we have done differently in this relationship to generate a different social world with that person? That's what I love about the question in terms of what are we making? And so, in this particular perspective, the quality of communication doesn't exist in its presence or absence. That's not an issue for us. And that's a whole other lecture on why there's no such thing as the absence of communication. The effectiveness of the quality of communication doesn't exist on whether it's there or not because it's always there. As long as you and the other person are there, you're interacting, you're communicating. But the quality of communication lies in our ability to take advantage of opportunities to create meaning with others. I took a class on this campus from a professor who's no longer on this campus. I couldn't even tell you the professor's name, to be honest with you. But I took a class on this campus where every day, when we came into the classroom, we sat down, and the professor stood, the tenure track PhD professor, stood in front of the room and read the book to us. Every day. He took attendance. Okay, so he knew what he was doing, all right? He took attendance, and attendance mattered, and he sat